Hey guys, Drifter here. Today I've got a video for you about us versus them, the good guys versus the bad guys, and you, wherever you are in the world, are obviously the good guy and nothing you've done is ever wrong and your group is perfect. The gameplay that you're going to get to see is me using akimbo skoprions going off really hard here on Hawaii. Is it Hawaii or Hanoi? I don't really know exactly. I don't pronounce these words very well, but I am going to destroy these people. Going to go 31-6, no lethal kill streaks, all akimbos except near the end. I do believe I pick up a Mac 11 because I totally ran out of ammo. Great gameplay, but that's not what we're talking about. Today we're talking about us versus them because that's pretty much how human history has always been defined. Human history, depending on what standpoint you're reading, is either us, the good guys, versus them, the bad guys, or maybe if you're on neither of those groups, these two groups competing with each other with moral qualms, kind of like Game of Thrones. Nobody's really good, nobody's really bad, but there's still these groups that are competing with each other. You see this in gaming too. You'll see it with the casual gamers versus the professional gamers, and I'll make a distinction there. Casual is in anybody that's not a pro gamer or doesn't do competitive or game battles or something like that. Those two groups argue over how the game should be made. Should they be made fun? Should they be made fair? Who should get the focus? There's also shooters versus RTS gamers. People like me that generally prefer shooting games argue and don't get along with those who generally prefer real-time strategy games or MOBA games. Or you have even subsections in that community that enjoy turn-based games versus, real-time games. Then you also have the casual versus hardcore communities. And in this instance, casual means anybody that's not a super elitist gamer who only plays the most hardcore, demanding of games, and that definition can get a little bit wishy-washy. PC gamers get sucked into that a lot, and they get blamed for being elitist, even though that's not always true. And this also happens in real life. You have simple race groups that are defined: black, white, Spanish. Then you have Asian. Well, even the Asians, they don't get along with each other. There's like a million subgroups of Asians that I don't want to get into. Politically, it usually divides between conservative and liberal. The parties will have different names depending on what country you're in or what state you're in, but conservative liberal is usually how it splits up, even though the definitions of conservative and liberal can change depending on your particular situation. The religious definitions, oh my god, the religious groups, I could spend like a year talking about that, and many others: ideological, philosophical, even just based on height or size or physical ability or something like that. However, these sort of descriptions, these sort of labels, this is a misunderstanding of how the world really is. What we're seeing the world split into all these different groups, and us and the them and the multiple us's and the multiple thems, depending on which group you're aligning yourself with at the time, isn't necessarily something that's true. This is an illusion. This is something that you are either, depending on your belief, made by God or evolved to think, to believe, to be a part of, and it really screws with the way we live our lives, and it causes a lot of bad things. It causes good things too. When we subdivide and form our groups, we form manageable units of people. We can do much more, much better than one person can. A small group that's easily defined is much easier to manage. I almost got that three-piece right there, than a large group with multiple members and a hierarchy and all that sort of stuff. It also allows us to be safe. The group will protect itself from outside threats, from invaders, from other groups, things like that. But then we're back to the group thing again. And it's also reaffirming. People feel good when they're like similar other people, emotionally, mentally, and even well, that's for safety again. They reaffirm what you believe in, what you stand for, but this isn't always good. Now, I'm going to focus mostly on the bad today because I believe that's more important to get out. I don't need to tell you why forming groups is good because you already do it and it works for you and you already know, but I did want to tell you some pitfalls that a lot of people run into, and it's a little bit of a psychology video where we're going. The bad things are that it pits us against each other both for resources and for power. Most often this results in some sort of conflict or some sort of war, and it has to do with how we define our groups. There are two important factors. Number one is that you are in some way similar to those in your group. Usually this is one thing that the group all agrees on that combines together like one single factor, depending on, sometimes it's a big one like race, sometimes it's political, sometimes it's just like we all like peanut butter. But more importantly than group number one is that you are very different from non-group members. This is what the group does. It reaffirms that you are different from them, and that us, our little collective of people, are radically, so completely and totally different than the other group that we just can't get along. For example, I'll say Muslim versus Christian. If you are a Christian or if you are a Muslim, there is many denominations of Christian. You have Catholic, Methodist, Protestant, Baptist. Well, Protestant's a big one. Anglican. You have more liberal Christian. You have, did I say Mormon? I can't remember if I said Mormon or not. There's a lot of different groups that would call themselves Christian. And even if you're Muslim, there's Sunni, there's Shiite, there's the new There's the Black Islam. That's a whole different, like the radical Black Islam. That's a whole different thing. And even these groups, if you ask a Muslim if he's much, it's like, oh, are you different from the Christians? Oh yes, us Muslims, blah 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 blah. But then even inside that group, they have differences, and the more important thing is not necessarily that you're similar to all Muslims in the world, but that you're definitely not a Christian, or the other way around. Based on whatever criteria you formed your group on, you almost always end up with in-group favoritism. This can involve likability of members. You just like the people that are in your clique or in your group more than you like other people, or maybe more than you should like them based on their characteristics alone. You value them more, or you trust them more for the same reasons. You also have an affinity for their beliefs. Let's say you're in a chess club and you're all big chess fanatics, and that's the only thing you have in common. If a group, or maybe one or two people, have a few other things in common, they like a particular set of moves, they like a particular strategy, you will naturally be inclined to like their beliefs more than you would if you had just seen it independently of their association of the beliefs. Like if you had just read it online, you wouldn't like it as much as if the person in your chess club told you this was best. Same thing with gaming or guns or any sort of hobby. But most importantly, it's with resource allocation is where favoritism goes really, really well. You always work to get the best resources for your group. Whoever you and your people are going to get the best stuff if you get the choice. Not necessarily that you're going to shaft everybody else and steal everything and leave them all out to hang and dry, but if you can only do one or the other, if you can only reward one group, you're going to reward your people and yourself. This is how we're programmed, and it's what we are going to do almost every single time. An offshoot of this, and what I personally believe that causes the most problems in this world, is outgroup derogation. It occurs when another group is seen as threatening, hindering, or lesser than your group. So in your group, you're aware that there's other types of people. You probably classify them different ways, however you want to, depending on where you align yourself in life, psychographically, racially, religiously, or whatever. And you are going to see these other groups as threatening to your group, maybe. Now, some of them are just neutral, some of them are unrelated, but some of them might be competing directly with you. It could be a religious soul conversion thing, it could be a resource thing in a business department, it could simply be like a racial thing, different little communities fighting each other, or hindering your group. Maybe they're not a direct threat to you, but some action that they're taking is hindering or blocking the actions of your group, or making it unnecessarily difficult, which your group is not going to take kindly to. And lastly, there is a sort of superiority complex that we'll touch on a little bit later, just thinking that they're lesser than your group, that your group of people, whoever you are, wherever you are in the world, you're the bee's knees, you're the top notch, and that everybody else is just lesser and lower than you. This almost always leads to discrimination, not necessarily in the racial kind, but some sort of discrimination, and it will eventually lead to conflict if you have competing groups. But this is also the cause of stereotyping. You stereotype people outside your group because of the negative attitudes associated with competition and outgroup homogeneity. I almost said that word wrong because it's been so long since I've had to use homogeneous in a sentence. What homogeneous means is that all the same. It means that everything is composed of the same as originally a chemical term, but we now use it for other things. And in this context, it means that everybody outside your group, or a member of another group, they're seen as being very, very much so like each other. They're all very similar, there's almost no differences, but the people in your group are diverse. You are diverse, people have personalities, they have beliefs, they're not necessarily all the same, one's a rebel, one's not, but these other people in all the group, they all think the same, they're the same. The example that I will use of this is a study done, I believe I talked to the person that did this in person. This was a high school study, so it's been a while, and she tried to study the different social groups in her high school. This was in Mississippi, and this was a public high school in Mississippi, so we had pretty bad race relations. And she went around on, let's say, it was her side of the hallway because the blacks and whites were pretty separate. And she interviewed all the white students first. And what they would say is, oh, my group of people, this is the jocks, these are the athletes, I hang out with the smart people, these are the cool kids, these are the pretty girls. And you had your pretty standard, group of people, and they would always say, oh yeah, and that group, those are the blacks, and they would point toward the black end of the hallway, and just like all of them, they're the blacks. They're not jocks, they're not pretty, they're not smart or hot, they're just the blacks. Which she found weird, and then she went to the black side of the hallway and interviewed the people over there, and the black people said the exact same thing. Oh, well, this is the group of athletes, these are nerdy people over here, these are the people that are really popular, these are the girls that are really hot, blah, 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 this guy's emo, oh, and those are the whites. And every single one of the black people that identify themselves with some group point out the other groups and say, those are the whites. And what they never really saw is that their groups actually, other than the races, overlapped and aligned the same. And they ask what the blacks would think about the whites, and they're like, it's just them. They're all the same. There's no difference between them. Or what the white people thought about the black people. They didn't see the black jock and the black nerd and the black hot girl. They just saw a bunch of blacks. Whereas the whites just saw a bunch of whites. And getting my colors mixed up here, but that's homogeneity, that's outgroup homogeneity. Anybody that's not inside your group or one of your groups is seen as being all the same when that's not necessarily true. The last problem with groups and how we form ourselves, and this is the one that you can very, very easily watch out for, and it's one of the easiest to avoid if you know it, but it can get even the best of us, is groupthink and or polarization. If you're in a group of people that are alike in some way, especially if you're in a really actually homogeneous group of people that are all very similar, like say a group of lawyers, a group of accountants, a group of doctors, a group of theoretical physicists that specialize in fluid dynamics, something very specialized, they all think alike. They've been trained to think alike, they have similar beliefs, and just by who we are, naturally, we are not inclined to say no. We are not inclined to self-ostracize. We are not inclined to be unpopular. We want to agree or partially agree or kind of go with the flow or not make a protest. And what this can lead to is lots of bad decision making. Yeah, I can go with that. Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah. You have all these people saying yes and nobody's saying no, and they can run off with terrible, terrible decisions. This sinks entire businesses. A lot of the businesses that fail, you see this. I'll make fun of Microsoft and this when they connect. That's groupthink. That's a big corporate culture. They love to connect in the office. They think it's the best thing in the world, and they just yes. There's nobody there saying no. There's no anal person. There's no idea killer. There's nobody outside of their corporate group to say no, the Connect's a terrible idea. No consumer wants to be forced to buy it, and then they end up with a bad decision. This can lead to cults. It can lead to a lot of other things. And along with the reaffirming beliefs, groups have a tendency to grow more extreme over time. They have a tendency to polarize. They have a tendency to kind of clump together, and once they're together, they have a tendency to change their beliefs, and it really gets weird. The reason this happens is that people have such a strong desire to fit in, they will actually change their personal beliefs to get rid of the cognitive dissonance they have in order to fit into that group. So if you're in a group of people and they don't agree with you, but you really, really want to fit in, you may change your beliefs. Very rarely is this an instant action or a conscious action, but it does happen over time. Our overwhelming drive for humans is some sort of social interaction or to fit in. And if action is required, if you're required to do something, your beliefs will change very, very, very fast. Because let's say that you're opposed to murder, but you are a soldier or police officer, or you are a doctor that is a euthanasia expert, or whatever, just some sort of profession that requires you to kill people. What it will do over time is you will change your beliefs to in some way reflect that your actions are okay. Or let's say that you are a lawyer. This will be a more fun one. You're a lawyer and you are a really religious person, and the Bible says that thou shalt not lie, or you shall not lie. It's a pretty strict rule. You don't lie. It's not right. It's a sin. But as a lawyer, you are required to lie. You are required to withhold information. You are required to mislead and represent your client as good as possible. Even if you know that they're guilty as hell, once you agree to represent them, you have to do your due diligence, which may or may not involve lying and all these other sort of things. And eventually, you will change your beliefs. You may still believe that you're a Christian and that all these things are bad, but you will in some way change your beliefs to believe that you have an exception to this rule, or that it's okay for you, or for something like that. And I'm telling you, you say you won't do this, you can't do this isn't you, but I'm telling you, all of the research, all of the experiments, all of everything says that your beliefs will change to match your actions, and almost never the other way around. There's about 2% of people that will change their actions to fit their belief systems, and about 98% of people that will change their belief systems to fit the actions. And the other funny thing about that is, trust me, you're not in the 2%. It's just, not everybody can be that 2%. Not everybody can be the superhumans that break the mold and this sort of stuff. Everybody likes to think of themselves as better than they are, and that's not really true. So please be aware of your actions, and when you choose to do something, do remember that your actions will change your beliefs. So before you commit, think about it and think if that's what you want to permanently become. Also, take the time to think about in and out groups. I've gone on for a long time here. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something useful. If you did, don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe. Drifter out.